It's heavy. It's the state of football with your hosts, Rick Saratella and John Murphy, of course, here broadcasting from the Jersey Shore. John down there in New Orleans, VP of Toronto Argonauts. We are here weekdays, 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern. And boy, oh boy, this is the new home of real football talk in the morning. If you're tired of all the fluff, all the nonsense, all the shenanigans that mainstream media is shoveling down your throat, welcome on in. Let's dive into it. By the way, before I tell you about our star-studded show today, if you missed yesterday's episode, me and this man right here broke down all 32 NFL practice squads, just about every single player. So if you want instant impact and analysis, recap on about 500 players that were signed to practice squads, we have that show for you yesterday. We crammed it all into one show, so make sure you check that out. And today, we just keep it moving, keep it grooving. We have Dane Brugler from The Athletic. We also have our partner in crime, my brother from the Familia, NFL Draft Bible, Director of Scouting, Rise and Draft, Ryan Roberts will be on. We're going to pop on Adrian Terzoli here in just a second. And we're hoping to have Cam Gill, who we got a text this morning saying he got dragged into a special teams meeting. And, those undrafted free agents, John, they got to play special teams too. So we're hoping that we have him here to pop off and talk a little football with us. And, oh, by the way, as if it wasn't jam-packed enough, Craig Haley from FCS Stats. So we got the heavy hitters out. The big lumber bats that are up in Buffalo there with the Blue Jays, John, just smacking my Yankees around. So thank God for the state of football so I can come on here and get my therapy. Good morning. How are you today?
Yeah, I thought that was more the second quarter than the sixth inning last night. 10 spot is not what you're looking for, up there. So we'll see who scores more points this weekend. Was it the Bills? Did the Bills get more points in the second quarter, or did the Blue Jays get more runs in the sixth inning, last night? So I will say this, in the COVID era, of everything going on, I am 100% behind the idea that all the injuries that the Yankees had, the smartest thing they did was not to go bonkers at the trade deadline and just ride it out. If you're writing it up for chalk, you should, that's what you should do. We've seen it happen. I mean, the Islanders are playing Tampa Bay, Dallas is playing Vegas. Not the four teams you would have expected in the finals there. You've seen Denver come back from a 3-1 deficit. You saw Toronto come back from a 2-0 deficit and then be down 30 last night. I'm really anxious to watch and see how this plays out, in the football world. Because I thought last night, one of the things that made me, kind of pivot for a minute and wonder is, when I saw that BYU Navy game on the schedule, it made me wonder how BYU would have shortened everything, would adapt and play against that Navy offense. And instead, we just got a BYU blowout with their total talent up front, out physicaling Navy on both sides of the line. So I think that's going to be something very interesting is do we all overthink it? Or is there a method to the madness the way that we're, I'm overanalyzing the playoffs and the teams that'll be successful, but gauging it all off of who's in charge, because I think that's going to have a lot more to do with the on-field success of the clubs this year.
No, it's interesting. And, that BYU beatdown, I mean, I don't care when they were playing, like you said, up front, they just dominated off the line of scrimmage. And it'll be interesting, too. Of course, Army with the same style of offense. BYU visits Army, I think, in a week or two. So we'll see if they can continue to stop that triple option. By the way, the Blue Jays, best team in New York right now. And we're going to break it all down with the star-studded lineup. And before we do, talk some NFL. Welcome in Adrian Terzoli from the NFL Draft Bible, Beyond the Field Apparel, and, of course, up there in the Wagner neck of the woods where,
yes.
It seems like they're just churning out these NFL players up there in Wagner. We're hoping to have Cam Gill here shortly, who's finishing up a special teams meeting. And he is yet another undrafted free agent player to come out of Wagner, make a 53-man roster. Bruce Arians just raving about the upside with Cam Gill. I know that during the evaluation process, there was some concerns about his arm length and how that would convert over to the NFL side. Would he play defensive end? Would he play outside linebacker? At the end of the day, this guy gets after it. And I know, Adrian, you spent a lot of time with Cam Gill last year. We featured a very, very in-depth story on him written by yourself leading up to the draft. So take us behind the scenes. Tell us the story of this young man. He's been doing his thing for quite a while up there in Staten Island.
Well, good morning to everybody. I cannot say enough good things about Cam. Cam is one of those people that I've gotten to know, being a part of Wagner for the last 3 years. I was lucky to kind of watch him grow from a sophomore, junior, senior, and really see how he is not only grown as a football player, but grown as a person. And I think that's a huge testament to his family, to his coaches, and just to him as a person. And his story is really what I love about what I do for a living, is that I get to kind of go beyond what you guys do so well, which is the analytics and the data and everything behind that. And I really get to know the players as people. You know, we sit down, we make it as cozy as possible. And I really want them to tell me their story and, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. And Cam's been really great to kind of appease me with that. I've seen him a bunch of times. I've interviewed him probably 3 or 4 times. This is a kid that didn't really know anything about football. He started playing, he said he loved playing basketball. And he went into the whole thing, and then he started watching lacrosse with his brother, and he was like, these are the really cool uniforms. And he figured if you put on a couple of pads and you hit some people, that can't be bad. So he started playing football around 7, and he says, what does a 7-year-old know about football? He's like, you're running in circles and you're just not knowing what's going on. And it wasn't until he went to high school that he really started with a love of the game. He started at tight end, which is really interesting. He loved guys like Tony Gonzalez, and he says that was kind of his player. He wanted to be like him. He wanted to emulate him. He wanted to be Tony Gonzalez. And then around junior year, when they had some guys, you know, sick and injured with defensive players, he was switched to defensive end. And he said he never looked back. That was kind of his thing. He says, I got to hit people for fun. He says, they threw me in there. He's like, and I never even thought about playing, you know, offense ever again. So fast forward to now, you're looking at colleges, and he's born in South Carolina, moved to North Carolina, now is in Georgia. And he always wanted to go back and play for the USC. That was his dream. He said, I didn't know until, you know, I was a junior in high school that you could even get scholarships to play in college. But he said, if I'm going to play, if someone's going to give me money to go play at a school, he says, I'm going to go to USC. That was his dream. Unfortunately, as we know, USC never called. You know, his mom, God bless her, she is an incredible woman. She would drive him everywhere. If there were camps, he would go. She got his, you know, his diet was on point. This is really a mother who believed in her son, and that's kind of incredible. And he credits everything to her. And if you watch their relationship, it's the most beautiful relationship I've ever seen. So obviously we know D1 never called, D1 FBS never called. But we have this little known coach called Jason Hoteling who saw a video of Cam and said, I need him. I don't care how we have to get him. I need him. And the rest is kind of history. And with that, he brought in, about 2 years later, he brought in Terence Knighton, who we all know as, you know, as Pot Roast. And he brought him in, and Coach Hoteling and Knighton are actually really good friends. And he says, I want you to build NFL players. And that's really what Knighton has done with a lot of these guys. He's taken them, if you watch him with his guys, it's half mentor, you know, half football coach, and all around just really wants to build the best players he can. So when I interviewed Cam a bunch of times, his biggest thing was, I'm going to play. I don't care where I play, I'm going to play. If it's an FCS school, if it's an FBS school, if it's for the Senior Bowl, if it's for the NFLPA, if it's for East West Shrine, I just want to play. So he knew at some point, I think he kind of manifested it a little, that he says, wherever they put me, I'm going to play. So when his name wasn't called, obviously, in the draft, he was a little down on himself. And, you know, and I said, how did you feel after that? And he said that he felt a little defeated, but he really spoke to T Knight, to Coach Knight, and Coach Knight said, look, your time is coming. Whenever and wherever your time is coming. And we know now that that time came with the Bucks. And, you know, he said he had a couple of different things that he was kind of going back and forth with. He talked to his agent, and they just said, you know what, this is the best fit for you. And look, again, I'm a Giants fan, so let's be real. You know, anybody says Tom Brady, and I kind of twitch a little. But if you get to play with guys like Tom Brady and Gronkowski and, you know, everyone else that you get to learn from, you know, Cam's biggest thing was, when I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, he says, I know that it's time to pay my dues. And to me, to have that mentality and that leadership, knowing that you're playing with the best in the business and you now are part of that 1%, he's going to go far. And when he made that 53, I mean, I just screamed. No one is a bigger Cam Gill fan than I am. I mean, and you're just talking, he is, to me, I think he's going to be one of the best players to come out of Wagner and to come out of the NEC for a very long time. So I am so proud of him, and I hope we get him on. But if we don't, I know he'll be back at some point. I just can't wait to see him play because he is incredible. And everybody who talks about him says this one thing: he's special and he's different. And he really is. And it's not just for his play; it's for the person that he is. Again, it's his leadership skills. It's on the fields, off the field. Cam Gill is the person that you want on your team. He's the person that you want kind of in your life. And I could not be more proud of this young man.
Well, after all that, I don't know if we even need to have Cam on the show anymore. We got the whole background story. That was better than a one-on-one at the Combine, John. But as you know, down at the East-West Shrine game, you saw teams only 33 undrafted free agents to make rosters this year. Usually that number is around 50. But both him and Chris Williams, the defensive tackle there from Wagner, getting the call down to the Shrine game, and Chris Wagner getting picked up by the Colts practice squad. So two guys there from Wagner, but you can't get all the insight like Adrian just provided unless you were at one of those all-star games or at the Combine.
Yeah, and the thing that you like is, you know, the story when we mentioned him coming on as a guest, you know, today, that literally there are 5 guys that played on that roster who are currently signed to, you know, professional football contracts. And you got to give that coaching staff a lot of kudos for, one, recruiting them and developing them, but then having the awareness, you know, out there to push those kids the way that they have, right? And I text you, like, while we were talking, it's very funny to listen to a conversation about a young player who's a prospect and then hear that a guy that we put in an all-star game years ago is his mentor, you know, in that role. You know, so it's amazing that, you know, Terence Knighton has literally gone from playing and being in the role, you know, of Cam Gill. Now things went very different for him because, you know, he accepted the invite, you know, to play in the Texas versus the Nation all-star game, and he was a late round, you know, mid to late round type guy, you know, and then went down there and people saw, you know, this 330-pound dude who is, you know, a lot quicker off the ball, could do some different things than what they had done with him in college, you know, and he soared up the draft board, you know, but to see him develop and use all of that personality, you know, and all of those things that he's learned and turn it into an opportunity to coach right after playing and now have the impact that he's having. I mean, you know, he's coached Cam Gill, he's coached Chris Williams, he also coached Julian McLeod, you know, who I signed and brought up there mainly because, you know, after watching him and then hearing, well, who's coaching this guy, and hearing who it was, you know, you couldn't help but want to be interested, you know, in those guys. I mean, they are turning out not only, you know, as Adrian mentioned, not only quality players, but quality guys, you know, and I think that's something that, you know, when you look at today's NFL, you know, that's a big deal, you know, and if you've earned the trust of a, you know, a team that's clearly trying to go toward the Super Bowl, you know, out there, and you are getting trusted to be one of those guys, I mean, that's a hell of an accomplishment for all of those kids, but especially to earn a place on a team like that when literally they could sign anyone else for a role or a job like that. It does give, you know, a good indicator, you know, that a kid like that could have a long career. And we mentioned him yesterday. I mean, Julian Stanford has had an excellent, you know, career, you know, again, coming from Wagner, coming as a undrafted free agent, you know, and you've seen that conference start becoming, you know, a little more known, you know, for turning out guys on a yearly basis. And, you know, our regular guest when he's not, you know, out there at the Bills parade, you know, or at the, you know, celebrating too early, you know, for what's coming up soon here, you know, you got to give Ralph and that in NEC in general, you know, kudos not only for, you know, what they have so far, but I think what's coming forward, because you start looking at those programs, and we made fun there's 3 guys from Wagner. There's at least 2 guys from Stony Brook, out there. And you start looking at what Stony Brook's been doing, it gives you a good indicator that LIU might be able one day, to catch up to those clubs. And now there starts to be a lot of really good football being played, in the tri-state area. University of Buffalo, Syracuse has bounced back. You see what's happening in Connecticut, both at UConn and Central, Connecticut State. Like, there's a lot of good football being played, and it's not all just at the major, places. And we leave out the U because we know that they're about to bounce back in a major way. And if you're in the tri-state area and you talk about the U, it's not the University of Miami. It's the University of Greg Schiano. and they're coming, COVID or not, Schiano's coming, and it's not going to be too much longer before you see another Thursday night, in Jersey going off the chain when they're rushing the field. So I think it's exciting to see what the NEC has done, and to see a kid like Cam Gill get that kind of coverage, because when you see those good kind of stories, it also makes the people that do them, yourself, myself, Adrian, feel comfortable that you can cover a kid like Cam Gill and still get the results at the end of the day. And the results are not just about that he made the bucks. It's that you're seeing the metamorphosis of a kid like that, the program, the coach. There's so many levels to his story, and it's great to hear about it.
I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. And that's what I loved about it. And again, that's what I love about what I do is that, I don't think that the FCS, and Rick knows I'm a huge proponent for the FCS, where I don't think those guys really get the kudos that they deserve, and the same thing with the coaching staff, especially at Wagner, that has these guys. And you don't only have Julian McLeod, you also have Ryan Fultz, who signed to the Lions. You have Chris Gangarosa, who signed to Edmonton. So you do have a lot of these guys that have come out of this school that was really kind of counted out for a long time. And okay, great, they didn't have a great year last year. It happens. But you have these quality players that want to play. And I think it's a testament not only to wanting to play the game, it's a testament to the coaching staff who they believe in. Every guy that I've spoken to really said it was the coach. It was their head coach. They said, I want to play for this guy. I will walk through fire for this guy. And you don't see that a lot on college teams. You see a lot where it's the transfer portal and I want to go here and I want to go here and I want to go here. But these guys, a lot of the Wagner guys stay put, and they stay put because they believe in their coaches. They believe in each other. It's a real brotherhood. And like you said, if you ever have the chance to watch Coach Knighton with his guys, it's a family, and it's it is incredible to watch him, the way he does know how to split the difference between I am your mentor, but at the same time I am your coach, and I have no problem telling you all the ways you're doing things wrong, but here's how you fix it, and here's how I make you better. And there's not a single kid on that team that's worth putting his cleats on that's going to tell Coach Knighton, I don't agree with you, and I don't think that you're telling me the right thing. Every kid who plays for him knows that he's doing it from a place and coming from a place that I can get you here. And that's a testament to Knighton. That's a testament to Coach Haas. That's a testament to everybody that was part of that coaching staff that really created these NFL and CFL quality players. So I give them kudos, and I can't wait to see what these guys do. And there's right now I'm looking at 7 names, NFL, CFL, that just kind of that can run away with it. And I'm really excited about the future of the program, and the NEC in general.
Let me unmute myself. Shout out to Coach Haas. He's no longer with Wagner. He's now at Colgate, yes. But Terence Knighton, Pat Rose still up there, and hopefully we'll have him on at some point in the show. But Adrian, we appreciate the time here.
Absolutely.
Taking us behind the scenes with Cam Gill, always. And I'm sure we'll be chatting with you soon.
Yes. Have a great week, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. And of course, we're going to keep on that FCS theme. Before we do, John, I will say this, tracking the practice squad rosters and the undrafted free agents, one thing that I noticed is that the players who I said, oh, whoa, he wasn't in a camp. Whoa, he didn't get signed to a practice squad. What's going on? Oh, that's right. The character. So many guys that teams, especially with the short training camp roster, they avoided those character concern guys because in a COVID world, it's like, hey, we've got enough headaches, enough problems. We don't need any more. And that's one kind of common denominator. And not to call them out by name, it's just because I did the NFL PA Bowl, but the guys like CJ O'Grady, the guys like Keontae Harden, there's troubled past there, and you're seeing more teams in 2020 just say, hey, you know what? Especially if you're a rookie, I'm good.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that happened there was the other leagues playing, and you've seen, whether it's a young, a couple of young guys, doing their own thing, in the NBA, or seeing the young player kind of make a foolish error early in camp with the Seahawks. I think that's also kind of, tempered the opportunity, for some of those guys that are unproven. Because at the same time, you do see the Dolphins giving, Antonio, Callaway a shot. You do see the Seahawks bringing in Josh Gordon, in this time frame. So I think it's all really based off of, what kind of production value and where those guys are on the roster. Again, we mentioned it late on the show yesterday, but I think if you're still those guys, you have to know that that's your situation, and now do the best you can to give yourself the best shot. That if you are given a workout or an opportunity, know that you're already working from kind of that one strike or two strikes against you, because right now, the league is littered with talented players. So you have to do something above and beyond that. And one of the things you can't do is be a distraction or a headache, because right now, when you look at it, the talent pool, there are more guys than there are water in the pool. So there's too many people in the pool. There's XFL cuts. There's guys that didn't get 90-man shots. There's guys who got cut, before training camp. So now that they've seen you in camp, or now that they haven't seen you, you're swimming through, upstream to get another look. And that's just the bottom line, whether people want to hear it or not. But, a lot of those guys, it's going to be that their opportunity may have already come. And if you didn't get it, we're already on to the next cycle. We've already started playing college football games, and teams are already starting to evaluate, guys moving forward, that were in other camps or, getting other opportunities. So I think a clean slate, is the way to go, not only in 2020, but potentially moving forward as well.
No doubt about it. It's the state of football. Rick Saratella, John Murphy here. We're going to stick to the FCS theme with our next guest, Craig Haley. But first, we got to welcome in part of the NFL Draft Bible Familia. He is the NFL Draft Bible Director of Scouting. It's been too long. It's always Rise and Draft at the NFL Draft Bible. Been too long, Ryan. Welcome back to the rodeo.
Appreciate it, guys. I was going through a little bit of withdrawal, but I'm happy to be back with you guys this morning for sure.
Absolutely. And, if you are tuned in on the live stream, we broadcast live on the Twitterverse, YouTube, and Periscope. I know that we're doing the best to get to your comments. I think the best way right now is if you are watching live, if you're on YouTube and you leave a comment, we can definitely see it and react to it right away immediately. And if you have a question for our next guest, please feel free to chime in, because he is Mr. FCS. From FCS Stats, Craig Haley joins us right now on the state of football. Good morning, Craig. How are you today? It's been a while since we chatted about the NEC football conference, and we were just talking about some of these Wagner guys making the NFL. It seems like each and every year. I guess we'll start off there. Good morning. Welcome into the show. Every year there's a Wagner guy on an NFL roster.
I heard you talking about Cam Gill, and you're right. I mean, what a tremendous job Wagner has done to develop pro talent, and it's just a thrill to see it. And the whole league has really risen in the last 10 to 15 years. Just taking on all these FBS games draws attention. So it's been great to see, as you mentioned.
Now, the FCS here, I think I've been trying to keep up with your tracker, which has been very useful. I think there's something like 25 teams, you said last time, that are actually in play. How difficult has it been gathering information and covering the FCS this year as opposed to the previous years?
Great question, Rick. I mean, it's not a problem. It's just, it's day to day, as you know. I mean, this whole year of everything, it changes by the minute. There's 15 schools right now that are playing this fall at a 127 on the FCS level. So you're talking about 12%, ranging from one game like North Dakota State, their big game with Central Arkansas in a few weeks, up to 9 games, which is Central Arkansas is playing. So it varies. It's a small amount, about 50 games total, but you do the best you can in covering it.
And Craig, nice to talk to you this morning. I know a lot of teams are obviously exploring the option of moving to the spring, and I know that could get a little messy potentially with, that quick turnaround going from spring back to fall. What do you think are like the long-lasting repercussions of this decision for a lot of teams moving from potentially to the spring?
Sure, and Ryan, all 13 FCS conferences, voted, the president's groups voted to wait to the spring to play their league schedules. 6 of the conferences gave schools the ability to play this fall non-conference. Only some of those schools took it up, as we say, 15. If you look at the spring, most of these schools are going to play, 7 or 8 regular season games. And then you're going to have 16 teams go into the playoffs. Should this all come off, hopefully everything's healthy and it all happens. Very few teams are going to go deep into the postseason. Mid-May, they're looking at May 15th as a championship game. So it's going to impact everybody, but not maybe as many as we might think, just because most schools will be done by late April, early May. But yes, you have to be careful. You're going to have to restructure how you do off-season training and not really push these players, especially the ones who have injuries or coming off them. And they'll feel a little pressure to be back on the playing field and working out. So it all has to be adjusted. It all has to be – I don't think they're going to push back the start of next season, the 2021 fall, maybe a tiny bit, but nobody's really looking to do that. You just have to make adjustments for safety along the way.
So, Craig, let me get this straight because this is where we need your knowledge. So you're saying that there will be an FCS playoffs and that'll be held in the spring?
Yes. Right now, and all the FCS conferences are pushing for it. It's already underway that, the NCAA groups are already looking at the proposal. I mean, the NCAA, the FCS level has proposed 16 games. There'll be 10 conference championship bids as we've seen in a 2014 playoff, only 6 at-large bids. So it's really going to be, the very best of the best for at-large teams getting in. It'll start late April and run, consecutively up to, a championship game around May 15th.
I find that fascinating because how do they determine who qualifies? So North Dakota State plays one game and then they got to ramp things up in the spring and play again if they qualify?
Well, yes, North Dakota State will play, a regular season Missouri Valley Conference schedule, starting in late February. So it'll be based mostly off of that. I mean, obviously, you have to figure out North Dakota State's going to do well, but you're going to have to do very well in your conference to be one of the 16 teams because you're talking about 25% less of a field by dropping to 16 just for this spring.
Johnny?
Yeah, so Craig, do you see the clubs that are playing now? Is there a possibility that we'll like take the teams that are the best ones that are playing at the moment, but Trey Lance could play now and then not play in the spring, and Robert Rochelle could be playing now at Central Arkansas, but then opt out and say like I played my games, I'm going to prep for the combine at that point. Could you see like we've mentioned in other sports, there might be somebody, whoever retains their best assets and plays, in the stretch, that's, you could see a sort of a very different outcome to what the playoffs or what was expected of it, because North Dakota State's number 1, but are they still number 1 if Trey Lance is not playing?
It's you make a great point, John. I mean, obviously you have to retain as many of your top players as possible, and it's going to vary from school to school. Just like if you're playing this fall, you have to make sure, it's going to come down to schools maybe missing a player for a couple of weeks because of a positive COVID test. So in the spring, yes, somebody like a Dylan Reduns, the terrific tackle from North Dakota State, we already know he's just playing this fall, and then he says he's going to, train for the NFL draft. Trey Lance, still unsure, he's taking a risk perhaps if he plays the spring season. At the same time, he doesn't, he only has one season to fall back on for his tape. You have to think right now he's just playing the fall game and won't play in the spring. That's to be determined. North Dakota State has like a 16-member senior class, and they're going to not have a large portion playing in the spring. And it's not just North Dakota State; it's going to be other schools too. It's what we see now. If this had been a normal season, won't necessarily be what we see in the spring.
Fascinating stuff here with Craig Haley, FCS Stats. Craig, one last question about this whole scenario, which seems crazy to me because I think the risk for injury is what concerns me the most as a coach anyway. But you mentioned Central Arkansas, they're playing 8 or 9 games. Will they then play a conference schedule in the spring?
No. Obviously, it's an 11-game, college football season for the FCS, and no, they're going to opt out. There's a few schools that plan to opt out of the spring. Central Arkansas being one, because of the large. A lot of these FCS schools that are playing this fall, a lot of them are getting multiple FBS games, so they're looking at maybe a little bit of a payday here in the fall. To make up for all the losses. Some of them are playing up to 4 FBS opponents. The only one out of the 15 that's not playing an FBS opponent is North Dakota State. The other 14 are all playing FBS opponents. So no, a school that with as large of a schedule as Central Arkansas, no, they don't plan to play in the spring. A school like Jacksonville State, who's been a power in the Ohio Valley, they're playing 4 games this fall and planning to play a 7-game conference schedule in the spring and go towards the playoffs.
Wow.
North Dakota State's not playing anybody down there because no one wants to play them and lose.
It's become an issue. They had finally landed, a game this year with Oregon. It would have been, this past weekend. And sure enough, it got canceled. So, there's been a few schools that are struggling to get FBS.
Tell Coach Harbaugh there's a club out there that's ready and willing to play Michigan, and it'll probably end up just like it did with App State.
Well, there was talk of Nebraska, and North Dakota State, scheduled at the last minute, but it just didn't happen.
Great stuff. Hey, Craig, you mentioned the North Dakota State players. Rob Rochelle was mentioned here. Any other FCS guys for all us draftniks that we should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I mean, actually, Dylan Redun's from North Dakota State. I mean, it's a great year for linemen in that conference, the Missouri Valley Conference. You have a couple guys that are basically 6'9". Drew Himmelman, Illinois State. They have, they've produced some great talent. Spencer Brown is at Northern Iowa. He's 6'9". I mean, these guys are just huge, and those guys, it's a great year there. Unfortunately, it's a year where so many key players like Jabril Cox from North Dakota State did grad transfers elsewhere. The FCS lost a ton to the FBS this offseason, so that's impacting. Robert Rochelle, as you mentioned, Central Arkansas is somebody to watch. In the secondary. Brian Mills, North Carolina Central, another cornerback. The numbers are down, but there's certainly going to be, a small handful, 6 to 10 drafted out of the FCS.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Of course, we're always keeping tabs at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl. Hey, Craig, from one Jersey brother to another, we appreciate the time here on the State of Football. Always fun chopping it up with you.
Pleasure being on. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much. That's Craig Haley, the best in the business when it comes to covering the FCS. And fascinating stuff there. John, I'm going to go back over to you with this whole FCS playoff format. It seems crazy to me that we're going to go from, he said one team's going to play 4 games in the fall, 4 games in the spring. I mean, this just seems like a whole nother can of worms that we haven't discussed yet.
Yeah, but I mean, you would have to say still, we would have a pretty good idea what's motivating, these people. There's a reason why, they needed 2 teams to play in that kickoff game, or else, you lose that spot. You lose that major opportunity to be on national TV, as that level of football, and there's still, money to be made. There's probably quite a few less zeros, in those budgets than what's at Alabama or, ACC, SEC, Notre Dame, and places like that are continuing on playing. But nonetheless, FCS football is probably, a big, reason why the rest of those programs are playing, sports at those universities. And you're going to see the sports that are, it's primarily football, and obviously that's what we talk about. But I think the sports that are the major contributor at other universities, at some of them it's lacrosse, some of it's the baseball program. Obviously, we know what basketball programs bring in. It is going to be really, really hard to not try to get some of these things scheduled, and be played if you have the opportunity to do it. And I bet the FCS playoffs, is something that is worth saving financially, even if you have to do it in a hybrid way. And like I said, I think the interesting part will be this is something that is decided on the field in terms of your record, then gets you in. Your record then gets you in. It's not something like the NCAA tournament where they're then making those selections. And if you get a guy back, or you lose a player late in the season, an 18-12 team can get in over a 22-9 team because the 22-9 team could lose their best player. Are they going to put North Dakota State in the playoffs? Are they going to put certain teams in the playoffs if they're not at full, kind of like they're full on guys, in there? And can you start seeing, like I said, some really interesting scenarios to say a dark horse club, with a lot of sophomore and juniors at the FCS level might knock out, a heavily laden senior team if some of those seniors are opting out, come the spring. But I think, in the turnaround, a university, a football program like North Dakota State, if they're playing now to help their seniors, which is a huge kudos to them for helping their guys, the best way that they can. If they then double down and play the rest of their schedule in the spring with all their young players, man, then look out 2021, for what North Dakota State getting to use the spring instead of just spring ball, that they will actually, have the ability to use the spring, to be either replacing Trey Lance and having that guy get on the field in the spring. It may not help them, in this FCS playoffs, but they should really be far ahead in 2021 and 2022 by using the spring to replace a lot of those 16 seniors.
Well, great stuff there from Craig Haley. You mentioned, he mentioned Dylan Reden's, the offensive tackle, declaring for the draft. So that showcase game there for him just as much as Trey Lance. And I will say, Craig said Trey Lance hasn't officially declared if he's playing in the spring or not. Hey, they wouldn't be doing the showcase game if he was going to play in the spring, right? So to me, I think Trey Lance is as good as gone, and you're hearing top 10 buzz. And, we'll probably start off right there with our next guest making his NFL Draft Bible debut and his State of Football debut, Dane Brugler, a longtime draftnik, well-respected. And Dane, it's a pleasure to have you on the show this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, anytime. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, hey, we love keeping tabs on what you're doing. I know you got a new podcast with Lance Zierlein. We'll talk about that. But we just had Craig Haley on talking a little FCS. And Trey Lance is a guy that's kind of taken the draft community by storm. You're hearing potential top 10 buzz. How deep have you dug into Trey Lance? Where do you kind of project him right now? Some folks are saying they like him even more than Justin Fields.
Yeah, and I did rank him ahead of Justin Fields in my quarterback rankings. And it's so tough that we even have to talk about Trey Lance already because we only have one season of a sample size. And he was so protected by that offense last year at North Dakota State. They averaged something like 46 rush attempts a game, and he averaged, I think, 17 pass attempts. So, I mean, he wasn't asked to put the offense on his back. And he shouldn't have been. He's a redshirt freshman. But it's so special of a year. 42 touchdowns, no interceptions. But because of the current circumstances, we need to talk about him as a prospect because there's a good chance he will be in next year's class. And where does he stack up? It's such a unique situation. I think that when you look at him, he, in a lot of ways, is a bigger Kyler Murray with just that physical skill set where he can threaten defenses with his legs, threaten them with his arm. I don't think he's as naturally accurate as Kyler Murray is. But I do think there's a lot of those flashes in there. And so, is he ready from a mental standpoint? We just don't know. He's only a redshirt sophomore, only 1 year of experience. And it's a little different from maybe a Carson Wentz, because Carson Wentz had the Senior Bowl to go to where, he could, really show what he could do against top competition. If Trey Lance goes pro after this year, after this one game, he doesn't have a sample size versus an FBS opponent. He won't be eligible for the Senior Bowl. So there will be missing parts of his evaluation, but nonetheless, a guy this talented, I think there's a very good chance he could end up in the top 10.
Dane, I appreciate you hopping on with us again this morning. Been a follower of you for a long time. I'm curious, though, we talk about how this process, how everything with COVID and the shutdowns has affected the programs, the players, all different angles. My biggest thing is, I've been talking with many people about how it affects the scouting process from a team perspective, independent scouting. For you and your own process specifically, how has everything that's transpired affected how you evaluate specifically?
Well, up to this point, it hasn't. My summers are the same where, I'm sitting down from, June, July, August, and just watching as much tape as I can all day, every day, and just to get a base understanding of the senior class and some of the key underclassmen, just having that foundation of the evaluation. So going into the 2020 season, you have something to build on. But now that the season's starting to get going, this is where it's going to be a little different, especially obviously the Big Ten and Pac-12, some of these other conferences like the MAC and the Mountain West and some of the FCS teams, not being able to see them, that's big. And we've seen it in the past where, a Nick Bosa only plays a few games, but he's a little different because we knew how good he was. Even going back to a Sam Bradford who missed almost all of his final year at Oklahoma, still being the number 1 overall pick. But these are top level guys. The amount of players we're not going to be able to see this season, it's really unfortunate. So, but this is the situation, and so we have to adjust. And it's talking to my buddies around the league, just they don't know about what this fall is going to look like in terms of school calls. They don't know if they're going to be able to go to different campuses around the country and see these guys during the week, watch film, talk to the trainers. There's just a lot of uncertainty all around it. So it makes for a really unprecedented situation.
Yeah, a different dynamic for sure. I want to follow up there because one thing that I'm hearing, Dane, and I'm curious to get your opinion on is, despite the SEC and some of these other Power 5 conferences playing this year, you're seeing like LSU, there's a handful of guys that are still opting out. And I'm wondering if this is a fad or kind of like Zoom calls, this is something that's here to stay because now, the players are finding out that, hey, there's agents out there willing to give me a stipend for the next 8 months and I can just train for the draft year round. I mean, is this something that we could see more of from the top line prospects?
Well, and I think that's important to phrase it like that because the top guys, I think there is there's going to be some discussion there. A guy like Jamar Chase, is there really much he can do this year that's going to alter, how teams view him? I mean, he's not going to top his production last year, without Justin Jefferson, without some of that offensive line, new quarterback, new play caller at LSU. There's a good chance that Jamar Chase, just doesn't have near the production that he had. And that's through no fault of his own. And so it's a situation where I can understand why he would want to opt out and just kind of spend this year training and getting ready for the pre-draft process. But I would say for the most part, most of these guys need that extra year, because the NFL, it's not a developmental league. And so if you have a chance to play, get on the field, hone your skills, get better, you have to take advantage of it. And, this is a weird year. I'm not going to criticize any of the guys opting out because I don't know their true intention. I don't know if they really are, so worried about the virus that they want to keep their distance. Caleb Farley talked about, the corner from Virginia Tech talked about how his family members, already losing his mom and not wanting to, lose another one of his family members. So there's so many different motivations here. But for some of these guys, it's a real missed opportunity. Jamie Newman at Georgia, had a really good year last year for Wake Forest, but this is going to be his chance to get into the top 100 picks. Talking to guys around the league, he's anywhere between the 4th and 6th round by a lot of teams right now. And so is he running from competition? Is he truly worried about the virus? There's a lot of question marks there. And so the pre-draft process is going to be even more important for a guy like Jamie Newman. Does he get the Senior Bowl invite? And if he does, he better knock it out of the park that week in Mobile, because that's going to be a big part of his evaluation after not playing this year.
Johnny?
Yeah, I think the most interesting part will be now how we go from a season of college football where in all likelihood, a lot of it is done at a distance. So you're going to have the film, but that's pretty much it. And then how or exactly what situation are we going to be in when it comes time for these next events? Because a lot of those next events is the interpersonal interaction between the players and the teams, the media and the NFL, the agents and the players. It's everybody interacting. And how are you doing a socially distanced Senior Bowl? How are you doing a socially distanced interview process with the players? And then how are you running the combine if you are not allowed to have guys in these group settings? And then the next part will be the part of, hey, those top 25 visits. Will teams and will people and will the agents want those players hopping on a plane and literally, normally the way teams cheated to know who was going from one to the other is you could just look at his bag tags, and see where the kid's been or ask the kid where he's going. Are you in Green Bay wanting a kid to come visit you who's training in Arizona, went to LA, visited the Dolphins, and now you're bringing them into your facility in Green Bay? You talk about the testing. The testing is going to become a huge aspect of this in order to act like business as usual, to just casually think about being at the Senior Bowl. How do they put a bowl game on and have you in the stands evaluating, have people on the field working with them, and have all these kids interacting with each other and the interview process in these hotels the way that we've all seen it? It's still something that we went through that part, right? Like that was back when the world was normal, and we went through all that right up until March, and now we're having to figure out how you're going to do this whole next process, because we've already seen how many kids either A, have never gotten a workout or opportunity, how many of those guys got cut early with the early cuts that the NFL did, and how many of them are not. You don't see a lot of those names showing up on the workout list, right? The guys on the workout list are pretty consistently guys that they're just kicking the tires to make sure that they're still alive and breathing and well. When you see the average age of the add-on guys on the practice roster is basically older than all of us. I mean, there's a 41-year-old quarterback on the practice roster. So when you look at it, I think that this next scouting cycle, if you're these players and you're these agents, that's the most critical aspect of this, is that the clubs that can figure out how to make their way through this and still get quality grades on those mid to late rounders and the unknown guys, that's going to be crucial to doing it. And if you want to have some fun, hey, who's going to be that guy? There'll probably be somebody that could get drafted now that the upscale media, the mainstream media will have no idea who that guy is. Or you could have a player in your top 100 and he's going to be based off of a lot more or less information than other guys. And that is rarely ever seen in that scenario. So, I think those are the main things going into this cycle that are so interesting, that the piecemeal of how you're getting information, and you got to wait for the spring to see these guys to then compare them to the guys you saw in the fall. And is the last thing you see from a guy in the spring going to be better than remembering what you just saw out of 3 or 4 conferences, that played 4 months earlier. Like that's a pretty dynamic, different way of scouting to say that you could be at the combine, watching the combine, and then in your downtime, be watching the games that are being played that weekend while you're at the combine.
I think we're going to see the guys, the scouts, the evaluators around the league who have been doing this for a while, who have that thick Rolodex, can be a little bit, they'll have a little more of an advantage than some of the area scouts who have been only in the league a year or two and maybe don't have that network of contacts throughout college football and throughout the scouting world who can get as much information. We know, scouts, they have to be evaluators, they have to be detectives, they have to be psychologists. You have to be information gatherers. And that's something that is going to be really important this year. And the guys with more experience that have been around for a while, they might have a little bit more of an advantage because of all the complications you're talking about. Who knows what this draft process is going to look like? Are we going to see some type of bubble for the Senior Bowl, some type of bubble for the Combine where you have to get tested before you enter the bubble, and then once you're in, you're in? Who knows what it's going to look like? Who knows what the world's going to look like in 4 months from now? But regardless, I think it's going to be interesting because not only from a prospect perspective, but the NFL too. Do they feel comfortable sending their employees, their scouts, their coaches, their personnel guys to a place where they're interacting with different people who have been traveling around? So there's so many different dynamics here. Hopefully we get through the season, then the NFL has some type of plan in place to keep everybody safe, but at the same time, let everybody do their jobs.
And Dane, I've been following along with the big boards you've been posting, your positional rankings, all that great stuff. One thing that's like my favorite part of the summer evaluation is you kind of see those traitsy guys, which you kind of pinpoint. You want to see how they develop throughout the season. One guy, I think you had Jason Oweh pretty high up on your most recent board. So obviously with the Big Ten potentially pushing to the spring, we'll see if that gets resolved here in the near future. Who are some guys for you that you're pumped about that kind of fit that perspective of guys that haven't had much film, but you see the traits, you're excited about seeing them? Who are some guys that maybe we should be keeping an eye on for the fall season? And maybe adversely, who are some guys on the other side that you were excited about that maybe we won't be able to get to see too much this fall?
Yeah, and that's the biggest bummer about this is Jason Oweh is a perfect example who was going to take over the starting job from Mitri Gross-Matos, now in the league. Talk about a physical freak. This guy, 6'5", 255, former big-time basketball player in high school, still relatively new to football and still learning the pass rush position, but he's such a freaky athlete. He plays with strength, plays with athleticism. Really want to see him develop his move-to-move transition, understanding how to set up blockers, get to the quarterback. And last year, just coming in reserve duty, playing as a part-time role, really grabbed my eye. So I put him pretty high, and it's just he's going to have a tough decision to make because the talent is there, but just the body work isn't, and you just don't know what you're getting with him. So, it's a bummer for him. I think for Ohio State, Baron Browning, 5-star guy out of high school, out of Texas, and the light bulb's slowly illuminating for him. And with Malik Harrison, 3rd-round pick of the Ravens, now in the NFL, he's going to have a chance to be a starter. Who knows? Do we see the Big Ten here in a few weeks? Hopefully, because a guy like Baron Browning could really benefit. A big-time athlete, size, length. He can run. He can rush a passer. He can drop. He could be a 3-down player. It's just this is going to be his year to emerge and break out and show scouts, hey, yeah, I am a top 100 pick. You should consider me on day 2, and I'm not just a toolsy guy that's you're going to get later on and take a gamble on. So hopefully we get a chance to see these guys at some point before the process, and it gives them a chance to make a decision because it's tough for some of these guys. Baron Browning, perfect example, who's a 4th-year senior. Technically, he could go back to school if he wants, but it's should he go now because he knows he's going to test well and he can still be maybe a mid-round pick, or go back to school and prove that he's a 2nd-round pick. So it's a tough decision for some of these toolsy guys. In terms of the guys that are going to be back, one guy that really stands out for Florida State, Kendo, the defensive end, who missed almost all of last year with an ankle injury. This is another 5-star guy who you see the flashes. I mean, Kendo is what you draw up when you're looking for a pass rusher with his size, his length, his ability to bend and disrupt the pocket. So I'm really eager to see Kendo back on the field. He's another guy who I think is a first-round talent, but the sample size, the body of work, just not there yet to justify teams taking him.
Some great insight here from Dane Brugler of The Athletic, giving you some names you need to know, some guys you need to do some homework on. And if you don't, well, then, hey, get the beast, right? He's been doing this for quite some time. He's taken that platform over to The Athletic, and you have a new podcast as well, a new partner in crime there in Lance Zierlein, another guy, one of the best in the business. Tell the people at home about the new podcast. And for those that don't know, I mean, they should know by now, but hey, we've got a new platform, new audience, maybe just tuning in for the first time. Tell them about the beast, Dane.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The draft guide is something that I've been doing for a long time now, 15 years, and I try to make it as comprehensive as possible. And if I always try to paint a picture. So if you don't know anything about a player, you just look him up in the beast, and it's everything there, from his testing information to his background to, of course, the analysis. What type of player is he? Where does he project? All that information. So try to make it as comprehensive as possible, and people seem to really enjoy it. So as long as people enjoy it, I'll keep doing it. And then, I'm really excited about this podcast, Prospects to Pros. Lance Zierlein, one of the veterans of this industry, who does all the profiles for NFL.com. He grew up in a coaching family, so he's been around the game a long time. Really has a strong eye for scouting, and so a lot of fun conversations going to have this season throughout the college football season, NFL season, then into the draft process. So only one episode in, but I'm really excited about where it's headed.
All right, we're looking forward to it. I guess I got some catch-up listening to do with the first podcast. Give us a little teaser. What did you guys discuss there?
I just kind of took the temperature about the current state, kind of what we talked about here. It's just what's going on, how are scouts approaching this season, and then we also broke down my preseason top 50 board. Lance has looked at some of these guys. He gave his opinion about who he thought maybe I got right, who I had too high, who I had too low. So interesting to hear his perspective about my top 50 board and how his feedback with where I had my guys ranked.
No, that's going to be a great dynamic. I'm looking forward to listening to that. We thank you so much for joining us here on the State of Football. I did hear from Cam Gill while we were on the air. I said, Cam, we'll have to reschedule you, brother. We got Dane Brugler. We got the heavy hitters in here on the State of Football. I want to thank all of our guests today. Craig Haley, FCS Stats, Adrian Terzoli from Beyond the Field Apparel, Ryan Roberts, of course, at Rise and Draft. My co-host each and every morning here, John Murphy, on the State of Football, weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern. We'll be back tomorrow, everybody.